Up are new documents we obtained under the Maryland Public Information Act from Montgomery County School District, which is the biggest district in the state of Maryland. It's right outside of Washington, D.C. It's the suburb of the deep states. You can imagine there's lots of interesting things going on, including, as we uncovered in these documents, outrageous classes in critical race theory that are promoting the worst of the worst in terms of racism and anti-Americanism. I'll get into that. On top of that was a new program or a new audit that taxpayers were being asked to fund, $454,000 for a anti-racist system audit by something called the Mid-Atlantic Equity Consortium, which is one of these companies in the private sector that cater and promote this type of agenda using, as I said, tax dollars. Their expertise is, quote, in using intersectionality as part of its theory of change and how it makes us uniquely positioned, makes them uniquely positioned to conduct the anti-racist audit and mitigate the root causes of systemic barriers. So this is an entity that buys into the idea that America is fundamentally corrupt because it's fundamentally racist and oppressive. It's the communist revolutionary approach. They won't say they're communists. They won't say they're Marxists. They won't say they're revolutionaries. But this is philosophically where they're coming from. On top of that, we receive materials specifically from classes, booster classes given during the summer that promoted material that you're just going to find shocking. It is something out of the middle school that was given as part of a summer course, a social justice class that had at its heart a pyramid slide depicting differences between overt and covert hateful white supremacy. Covert and overt. According to the pyramid, Make America Great Again is an example of covert white supremacy. The phrase is ranked on a pyramid just below racial slurs. And I'm going to try to share the screen here to show you what the pyramid looks like so you can look at it yourself and get some more information about it. Let's see if this works. There we are. So you can see here, I'm going to use my little cursor. This is the pyramid, covert white supremacy, socially acceptable. There's a line there, and above that line is overt white supremacy, socially unacceptable. Obviously, much of this, obviously, lynching is something that is obviously criminal and murderous. But Make America Great Again is seen as covert white supremacy. What else? School to prison pipeline. That's leftist claptrap, as I call it. Denial of white privilege. So if you deny white privilege, that is white supremacy. It's covert and it's not appropriate. Denial of racism. So if you deny you're a racist, it means you're a white supremacist. What else is here? Celebration here on the lower right. Celebration of Columbus Day. Self-appointed white ally. What does that mean? It means if you see yourself as an ally of minorities, you're a white supremacist. Assuming that good intentions are enough. Meaning, again, if you deny you're a racist and you, as a matter of principle and philosophy, oppose racism, that simply isn't good enough. And in fact, it's covert white supremacy. And this is other material. Anti-immigration policies and practices are white supremacist. Claiming that whites are targeted with racism is racism. Being colorblind is racism. Colorblindness, see them at the bottom? And this is part of the school curriculum. Again, students, write your response. Eurocentric curriculum. You know what that means. Police brutality. And what else? Oh, and believing we are post-racial. So saying something like Barack Obama was elected president, how can there be systemic racism in the country? Well, that means you're racist. So this is the sort of catch-all philosophy from the radical left in this program. And when you go through the program, and I can show you all the slides, but they're available on our website at judicialwatch.org. You'll see that this is propaganda to the max. There's more material in there that talks about implicit bias and structural racism. Listen to this. This is what's being taught children, middle school children, by the way. Race is created to justify enslaving people from Africa. Economic engine of country. So it suggests that slavery is still the economic engine of our country. I'm not sure what that means. National narrative, ideology, belief system about people of color being less than human and less than white justifies mistreatment and inequality, which is white supremacy. I guess I can't argue with that per se. If that is indeed a national narrative, but there is no national narrative that any American is lesser than any American. Dominant narratives about race, family, media, society, coupled with racialized structural arrangements and differential outcomes by race, all prime us to believe that people of color are inferior to white people. So this is the structural racism graph. The students are suggested to review a TED Talk with the founder of a TED Talk, which is one of these establishment type lectures that are available online where liberals talk to each other generally. Founder of Black Lives Matter. The terms that are defined in a website created by, as part of this class, include Black Lives Matter, which is defined as a political movement to address systemic and state violence against African Americans. It claims that Black Lives Matter is an ideological and political intervention in a world where Black lives are systematically and intentionally targeted for demise. Black Lives Matter is anti-American, anti-police smearing. No one believes Black lives don't matter. Saying Black Lives Matter suggests that there are people who think that Black lives don't matter and that those people run the institutions of America. It's a smear. It's designed to overthrow our system. All lives matter. More importantly, your life matters. Power, defined among other things as, quote, wealth, whiteness, citizenship is systematic racism. Patriarchy, heterosexism, and education are a few key social mechanisms through which power operates. Racist policies. They say there's no such thing as a non-racist or race-neutral policy. Every policy is racist. White privilege. This is defined as the unquestioned and unearned set of advantages, entitlements, benefits, and choices bestowed on people solely because they are white. And structural white privilege is described as a system of white domination that creates and maintains belief systems that make current racial advantages and disadvantages seem normal. And white supremacy is defined, this again, taught to children. This is all taught to children, not to adults, but to children. The dominant, unquestioned standards of behavior and ways of functioning embodied by the vast majority of institutions in the United States. That's what they believe. White supremacism is the modus operandi of the vast majority of institutions in the United States. White supremacy culture is further defined as the glue that binds together white-controlled institutions and into systems and white-controlled systems in the global white supremacy system. They compare in another class COVID and systematic racism as being two sides, looks like, of the same coin in terms of being a dual pandemic. Racism is a pandemic. Well, the only racism I see here is the racism directed at alleged white supremacy, which they define as anyone who doesn't share their Marxist collectivist beliefs. As I said in the release about these documents, the racist, revolutionary claptrap in these documents should be nowhere near a school classroom. These documents show that extremists have access to our schools and are willing to abuse the access to children in order to advance a dangerous, divisive, and likely illegal agenda. So I told you about, the $500,000 or so being spent on this group that's being used to root out systemic racism within Montgomery County schools. They talk about intersectionality, which is essentially the theory that virtually every aspect of an individual is subject to oppression, if they're the right individual or the right demographic. And of course, white males are at the center of this oppression, meaning they are the ones pushing it. And that's what the push is for. Now, you probably find this objectionable, right? You probably find this morally problematic, right? Well, I'm telling you, that's not the biggest issue. I find it objectionable. I find it immoral. I reject it as a matter of intellect and basically intellectually, I should say. But it's also, it seems to me, illegal. Federal law, state law in Maryland, I don't need to look up state law in Maryland, and the Constitution prohibits treating people and in this divisively racial way. They use tax dollars to target white children and target entire demographic groups as being evil, who should be opposed. According to them, their views should be opposed based on their race. Is a violation of virtually every civil rights law we have in the greater scheme of things in our Constitution, which requires that everyone has equal protection of the laws. So this is what's going on in Maryland. Now, of course, I say it's illegal. Maybe a lawsuit could overturn it. It seems to me the Justice Department, Department of Education, and Maryland state authorities should be targeting this. You have in Chicago, for instance, the mayor, the mayor there, Mayor Lightfoot, who by all accounts is a terrible mayor. She just said that she thinks that the press corps that covers her office is too white and too male, and therefore she's only going to give one-on-one interviews, or she's going to deny one-on-one interviews to white males. Explicitly racist from a government official. And as I told you before, and it highlights the fact that the radical left does not oppose racism. They don't oppose racism. Principled conservatives do. Principled liberals do. This isn't liberal versus conservative. This is, as I said, a radical extremist movement that is illiberal, that wants to overthrow our system of government and replace it with a regime that would destroy all our liberties. And it's bad enough to have this in our schools, and I say the mayor, and then you have President Biden talk about equity. Every time you hear equity, as opposed to equality, that is, again, a Marxist-Leninist approach. And I don't like to use those words oftentimes because oftentimes it's not appropriate in the context of American political discussion. But we have a rising communist movement in this country now that we have to address in a forthright way. So when you have the President of the United States talking about equity, equality of outcomes, that's Marxist dogma. Now, obviously, the president faces significant cognitive challenges, so I don't know if he knows what he's saying, but the people around him should know what he's saying. So you have racism, Marxism, anti-Americanism, vicious anti-policeism. I guess that's a new word, right? But everything is an ism these days. Being rammed down the throats of our children. And don't think if you're in a private school, you're immune from this. It goes on all over the place. And Judicial Watch has been uncovering and investigating this for years and years and years. And it's been out there like a low-grade fever, and now it's kind of metastasized in the sense that you have the Biden administration pushing this through, they're trying to they have a new funding and grant mechanism they're trying to get through. You have the president promoting it. Every time you hear the word systemic racism, but that's someone who says that, why don't they leave the country if they believe that? If everything in the country is racist and our system is oppressive, either they're revolutionaries or they should leave. I mean, I joke, maybe the president should not be, if the country's systemic race, if there's systemic racism in the country, maybe the president should resign. And we'll just decide who becomes our leaders based on race. That's what the left wants. And this is not something I'm saying I'm mischaracterizing, because this is the material I'm seeing in the classroom, in the military, in the agencies, out of the Oval Office, in corporate America. You know, as we highlighted up in our case in Massachusetts for Coach Dave Flynn, a high school football coach who was fired because he objected to this type of material in his children's classroom, ancient history. They were putting in Black Lives Matter propaganda into an ancient history class. He said, what's going on here? And they basically told him, we're not changing it. He took his kids out of school and he was fired as a high school football coach a few months later. So even if you oppose this, they come after you. As I said, denying racism is evidence of racism, according to this extremist ideology. So, Judicial Watch is doing what it can to stand against this. We're exposing it. We're defending those who are punished for exposing it and criticizing it. We have this federal lawsuit. We have 2 lawsuits in California that advocate for the rule of law in the face of race-based quotas that are based on this critical race theory analysis, this time for boards of directors, where they're demanding quotas in California for boards of directors. Quotas. So whenever you hear the left decry racism and say they're anti-racist, it's usually the opposite. Now, they say they're not racist because they support the political agenda of the most radical extremists who purport to defend ethnic minorities. But they are, because that's what this is not a debate. Is it a debate? Now, of course, the left thinks that you can't be racist against whites because minorities have no power and only people in power can be racist. Do you buy that? Again, that's more revolutionary claptrap. So these are serious times. These are dangerous times. We have this rising revolutionary movement, and it's targeting your children. It's targeting our country's corporations, and our government is a major promoter of it. I mean, in the military, there was this story at the U.S. Space Command drummed out, sacked, by all accounts, an excellent officer because he criticized the Marxist theory that was being taught in our military. I mean, there are Americans, countless Americans, who fought and died to protect us from communism. And now this communist ideology is being promoted and mandated in our military. Pray for America. But we're going to do more than pray. We're going to take our God-given talents and use them to defend the rule of law and defend our Republican way of life.
Of one of the big guys in the news that we've been talking about, Dr. Anthony Fauci, this past week. And what did those records reveal?
Well, they reveal that there was a lot more money being spent, your tax dollars being spent in Wuhan than Fauci had claimed. He was telling Congress under oath $600,000. It was at least $826,000, according to these documents. And it looks like they only figured out how much money they were given after the White House, kind of started to, raise some concerns about what was going on. And this was in April of last year, several months after the pandemic emerged on the scene. And, when you look at these documents, it further confirms, and other emails have come out, that there were real internal concerns about whether the Wuhan Institute was the potential source
Right.
for the virus, and whether we were funding it either directly or indirectly.
Yeah, in fact,
None of that came through in the public discussion of it early on. It just was not discussed in any serious way.
No, you're totally right. And Tom, the documents that you've obtained at Judicial Watch reveal exactly the sum that you suggested, over $800,000 directed to the Wuhan Institute of Virology. And it was listed under the title, quote, Understanding the Risk of Bat Coronavirus Emergence. Now, I'm not sure, if any series of words could be a smoking gun, that sure sounds like the series of words that would be involved. I mean, it sounds like we were putting money into a program that very likely created or leaked, at the very least, this virus.
Well, that's the concern. And, others have pointed out fairly that the science doesn't necessarily mean it actually came from the Wuhan Institute. There's a possibility what is naturally emerging, and that's all fair. But what I would highlight is it's not just the scientific evidence you need to look at. You need to look at the circumstantial evidence beyond the science, the behavior of the Chinese. You have Dr. Fauci himself finally, after a year, saying, we need more information from the Chinese communists. And they've covered up information, and certainly our own government expressed some concerns internally that they may have been inadvertently, in the least seemingly, behind this virus mutation, which was engineered potentially infecting the world.
What do you think about Fauci saying that he's above scrutiny now? Yesterday, he was telling Chuck Todd that if you attack him, you are attacking science.
Well, it's hard to. He's obviously believing the media stories about him that he is above scrutiny. He's echoing the establishment view on Dr. Fauci. Look, I remember passing along an email, tweeting it. He had to send an email to Hillary Clinton's top person saying how much he loved Hillary. And I said, isn't this interesting? That tweet resulted in critical news stories of me in the New York Times, the Washington Post, The Hill, The Guardian, USA Today. They were suggesting I was placing his life at risk.
Wait, what?
This is dead serious. I'm deadly serious.
I don't
about
remember.
This.
I remember that email, and I remember you sharing it. I don't remember the ensuing news coverage. So these mainstream corporate news outlets all came out and attacked you for daring to share a real email where you have Anthony Fauci sucking up to Hillary Clinton.
That's right, and I was part of the right-wing attack squad going after Fauci, and as a result, he's had to have increased security.
Yeah, I mean
really, really despicable news coverage. And so, why wouldn't Fauci say to attack me is to attack science? But that's been the approach here. Everything he says, and everything he says really isn't based on science. He mentions studies in a vague way, but virtually everything he says in terms of recommendations, they're all political.
Right. Yeah, they're political.
The mask recommendations are political.
Yes. In fact, it was December of this past year that he had a conversation with the New York Times' Donald McNeil, and he was telling him that he kept moving the goalposts on herd immunity because he was watching opinion polling, and then he would decide what number he would tell the public to reach when it came to the threshold for herd immunity. That's not science at all. That is explicitly political. And Fauci said this out loud, Tom Fitton.
And what else is interesting in this is for all of his supposed knowledge, he didn't really seem to know what was going on. One of his top officials is saying, in reference to the coronavirus research, the bat research we're talking about, this massive program over half a dozen countries, Tony doesn't maintain awareness of these things and doesn't know unless program officers tell him, which they rarely do since they're across town and may not see him more than once a year or so.
Yeah.
This is 4 months after the pandemic started.
Yeah. Doesn't that give you some comfort that our top officials have no idea the extent to which U.S. taxpayer money is going into a potential bioweapons program? It's like, hey, kind of seems like a big deal to track it.
And how does that fit in with the certainty that he suggested he had about these issues when his own people are saying he really doesn't know what's going on?
Precisely. Boy, this all sounds like one giant assault on science. Tom Fitton, thank you so much. Great to have you with us, sir.
You're welcome.
As always.
I want to talk briefly about the news that is breaking. And I say news in the sense I don't trust it, but the broad outlines are supposedly there were leak investigations during the Trump administration that continued into the Biden administration, to be clear. And these leak investigations included grand jury subpoenas issued for certain data to Apple, data that encompassed the communications of Adam Schiff, the head of the Intelligence Committee, the corrupt head of the Intelligence Committee on the House currently, and Eric Swalwell, the Chinese Communist compromised member of the Intelligence Committee that outrageously is still on the Intelligence Committee. So remember, there were these criminal leaks or leaks of, it looks like criminal activity, criminal leaks in the sense that there were leaks of classified information targeting Trump and not targeting Trump. And it looks like the investigation included whether or not the Schiff gang was involved in the compromise of classified information. Now, Judicial Watch separately filed a complaint against Schiff for compromising classified information and confirming classified information in a way he's not allowed to under the rules. So, if you are in the position to know whether something's classified and you confirm its existence, you're breaking the rules. And that's what Schiff did. So, and there were all sorts of other evidence Schiff was a grave leaker. So what happened is the investigation just continued and meandered. It sounds like the Justice Department, doesn't it? They were trying to vindicate the rule of law by pretending to do an investigation. So they really weren't vindicating anything. They were investigating something, world without end. And finally, it looks like Barr came in and said, what's going on with these leak investigations? So they were continuing. Schiff was informed allegedly in May that they shut the investigation down. So here you had the Biden administration shutting down, by the way, grand jury investigations into leaks that may have included the targeting illegally of Donald Trump, the violation of the rights, for instance, of General Flynn, who was also the targeting of these illegal leaks. So what is the news today? What is the big corrupt media's focus? How dare the Justice Department investigate people implicated in criminal activity, even though they're in Congress? How dare the Justice Department do that? As opposed to, why did the Biden administration intervene and end an investigation into its political allies? So that's the news of the day. And I just wanted to focus your attention on how to think about the news about the targeting of Schiff. Now, the outrage factor or the hypocrisy factor is high because Schiff is saying this secret investigation is the worst thing in the world. When in fact, as you may know, Judicial Watch has been in court trying to get access to secret subpoenas he issued, not pursuant to a grand jury, not pursuant to a court, pursuant to his own political agenda, his own alleged authority as a member of Congress. Subpoenas for the phone records of Rudy Giuliani and others, records that he ended up publishing, records of a journalist, records of a fellow member of Congress, the records of the president's lawyer. And they're taking the position right now in court that Congress can issue subpoenas on their own, and there's no accountability for it. That's the battle we're in right now. So when you hear Schiff and the dishonest media criticize the Justice Department for issuing subpoenas under court authority and grand jury authority, just know that Adam Schiff thinks he should be able to issue a subpoena against you, and you should have no ability to challenge it. And no court should be able to intervene to stop it from happening. He doesn't think he needs to get a court to violate your Fourth Amendment. Well, he doesn't think he needs to get a court to validate his subpoenas into whatever he wants. That's the position of the House, the Pelosi House right now. So I wanted to highlight that. You've got investigations going nowhere into crimes targeting Donald Trump. You have the Biden administration come in and shut it down. And what is the complaint? One of the folks that they dared to ask a question of, or two of the folks, members of Congress, who are not immune to prosecution, are screaming about it. So they think they can investigate Trump world without end, but Lord help them, right? Lord help everyone if anyone looks at them. So you can bet Judicial Watch is going to be investigating this investigation. We're investigating the investigators. And I've long said that Schiff should have been the target of criminal investigations over the handling and the sharing of classified information contrary to law. And I'm glad at least the grand jury had done it. Now, supposedly they were looking at 100 people. So, it wasn't like Schiff was the target. Now, the fact that he was on the list probably got the attention of senior officials in the Justice Department. But the fact is, according to at least CNN, if this is to be believed, that it was ongoing and it was serious enough that that they kept on issuing a mandate that it be kept secret, which is what they're allowed to do under law. Now, I'm not all that comfortable with anything the Justice Department does these days. I just think the Justice Department can't be trusted to cross the street. So yes, I am somewhat sympathetic to Adam Schiff. I mean, if Adam Schiff were smart, he'd say the Justice Department wasn't investigating me in any serious way. They were just doing this to pretend to mollify, Jeff Sessions or other Trump appointees who said, well, we have to be seen to be doing something. And so my Fourth Amendment rights were violated because they were never serious about this to begin with. But of course, that's not what he's saying. The fact is, there should have been a serious investigation. And if there was a serious investigation, I'm not confident it was shut down for the right reasons. Not because there wasn't any evidence. It's because the Biden administration shut it down. So that's the news. Speaking of Capitol Hill, we had the fake debate about the Pelosi Commission, as I call it, not the January 6th Commission. It's the Pelosi Commission. It would have been a commission set up by Schumer and Pelosi to target and harass and try to criminalize their political opposition using January 6th as an excuse to do so, which is of course more of the same, right? Well, thankfully, the Republicans, as I described to you last week, saw the grassroots opposition to this, saw the absurdity of it and the political nature of it, and shut it down and opposed it and at least killed it for now. But one thing I've highlighted is that who needs a January 6th commission when you have Judicial Watch? And I know many of you have been concerned about the shooting death of Ashli Babbitt, a veteran who was there on January 6th, was in the Capitol. You may have seen the video by now, or at least one of the videos, where there was a group of people. There were law enforcement behind her, and it was kind of chaos. And she tried to crawl through a window to get into the House lobby, essentially. And there was a police officer on the other side who shot her. We don't know who he was. We don't know why he shot her. What was he thinking? What was the analysis of it? Was there a report of it? Who investigated it? Can you imagine a shooting of an unarmed protester in similar circumstances in any other context? And you know what I mean by that. Where we would just accept that we can't get any information. It's now, what is it? It's nearly June, right? So 6 months or so since it's happened, and we don't know the name of the officer. We don't have any details about the shooting. And she's the only person who died in that riot directly. Officer Sicknick, who Judicial Watch helped, Officer Sicknick, who died, they falsely said that he died as a result of being assaulted by rioters, and that wasn't the case. He died of a stroke after the disturbance. The strokes weren't tied to the riot. It's natural causes. It was determined by the Office of Medical Examiner, who we had to sue, and after we sued, he finally released the report. he said it was natural causes. And the others who died also died of natural causes. So the only homicide was Ashli Babbitt. Now, was it justifiable or not? I don't know. I'm willing to give the police officer the benefit of the doubt, but I don't have anything. Normally there's an investigation. You can get a feel for what happened from the reports, and there's been nothing. So Judicial Watch doing what Judicial Watch does. We asked the Department of the Office of Medical Examiner and the Chief Medical Examiner, I guess it's called here in Washington, D.C., and the Metropolitan Police Department for all records, including but not limited to investigative reports, photographs, witness statements, dispatch logs, schematics, ballistics, video footage, and MPD officials' electronic communications concerning the January 6, 2021 death of Ashli Babbitt in the Capitol building and its related investigation. Now, specific requests to the Chief Medical Examiner as for all records, including but not limited to autopsy reports, toxicology reports, notes, photographs, and their official communications related to her death. So the normal course of action in the police shooting is to quickly inform the public of the details. But the lack of transparency in the killing of veteran Ashli Babbitt is unprecedented and obviously political. I mean, when something is going so wrong in a law enforcement investigation, it almost inevitably is because of politics, especially here in Washington, D.C. There have been so many criminal investigations of crimes that otherwise would be handled appropriately or normally, but they're almost always waylaid or corrupted or obstructed or otherwise undermined by political interference. And that we had to file a lawsuit for basic information after months and months of stonewalling is a scandal. And as I said, we're doing the work of a commission already. We have a lawsuit against the Pentagon and the U.S. Park Police for information about the deployment of troops and warnings about the January 6th protests. We filed suit against the Defense Department and about Pelosi's telephone call with the chairman and joint chiefs of staff on January 8th, which, where she was attacking and trying to undermine Trump. I told you about the lawsuit for the report about Sicknick's death. And we sued the the Capitol Police Department directly for emails and videos related to the January 6th events. All those videos. Many people complain there's thousands of hours of videos that haven't been released. Well, we're actually in court asking for them. So Pelosi runs the Capitol Hill Police Department, practically speaking. Why didn't she order them to release the documents, and the videos? Well, we know why. So Judicial Watch is in court almost a half a dozen times, half a dozen lawsuits on this. Numerous Freedom of Information Act requests, more are coming. So we don't need a commission. You already have Judicial Watch. So I'm proud that Judicial Watch is able to do that. And, I don't just say that because I'm the president of Judicial Watch, because I think as a citizen and a patriot, this work is essential to our country. And I feel strongly about that. My colleagues feel strongly about it. And I know those of you who support Judicial Watch directly and financially feel strongly about it as well.